This kind of heartbreak needs no translation. A mother's pain after burying one of her children. We met Lucia Seville and her family in a graveyard in the town of Marceline, just as those gravediggers were finishing their work, burying her daughter Rosna. She had also lost a grandchild in last weekend's earthquake, and her son and another daughter badly injured. One of her surviving daughters, Adeline, inconsolable.
Do they have a place to stay? Do they have shelter now?
They don't have a house. The house is destroyed. It's nearby. Flat.
These past few nights, they say they've been sleeping in the streets.
Okay, I was inside the house when it happened. The house was just spinning around and making a sound, woo woo woo, and I just...
The house was spinning? It felt like it was
spinning? Yeah, it felt like it was spinning. Everybody was underneath the rubble.
The family walking me down their shattered neighborhood to the wreckage of their house. Along the way, their mother-in-law's home, at least one body still stuck inside. Lucia is her family's rock, holding Adeline tight the entire walk.
So this is the house. Where did she pull him from?
Their house pancaked, and it's almost impossible to tell it ever was a home. And it was Lucia who saved her family.
She's showing me where she pulled her husband from and where they pulled the other children from as well.
She took the husband from here. Yep, I got it. And the empty space in the top is where she got her daughter. She crawled in on her belly and got her daughter.
The mother, guided by the screams of her loved ones, pulling out 6 survivors.
Everybody here says that they're sleeping in the streets. They're still afraid of aftershocks, and many of them just don't have a place to go.
Haitian authorities say they've counted about 2,000 dead from Saturday's 7.2 magnitude quake, a number they expect to rise. There are so many dead that caskets are being driven out on mopeds.
The fear that we have some additional earthquake in the upcoming days, so many people and families are sleeping outside. Devastating, it's a lot of sadness here, and people are deeply affected.
Making matters worse, Tropical Storm Grace plowing through Haiti, slamming the quake zone with high winds and over a foot of rain. The storm leaving behind battered roads choked with mud and debris. With the rain coming down on Monday, we first met Sarah and her family cooking dinner under a leaky tarp.
This tarp is basically held up by a stick, and that's all they have right now. Whoa!
In the morning, we went back to find them.
This is what's left of the tarp.
They were soaked and exhausted.
So, a neighbor allowed them to sleep in this bus, but they said it was shaking all night long, and that none of them slept.
Anybody hear me?
The few search and rescue teams we have seen battling tough conditions. But over the weekend, they managed to pull this mother and child from a collapsed building. They are the lucky ones. Very few others have been found alive. This region hit hardest by the quake, largely cut off, and some of the surrounding areas controlled not by the government, but by gangs. Mudslides transforming the landscape and burying major roads. The fight for resources, a matter of life and death.
They're distributing food behind me. You can see how intense it's getting. It gives you a sense of how hungry people are and how desperate they are here.
It's a lot of fear and uncertainty, and sometimes a loss of hope also that is affecting the population.
Desperation is everywhere in these villages. Help has not been. And the only reliable way in, by air. The U.S. Coast Guard is here running medevac missions to get the severely injured to higher care, with the help of medic volunteers like Brian Johnson. One after another, more than 100 medevaced in just the last 3 days. Hospitals here are overrun and often too damaged to actually house patients. Many patients stuck waiting, some in tents outside. At this hospital in Lakai, the broken bodies continue arriving. This is one of the patients who continues to trickle into hospitals like this. Survivors of the earthquake. He has a double pelvic fracture who have been suffering for days without medical care. Yves is just 9 years old, and he's been suffering for 4 days without proper medical care.
He's stable, but he's going to require intervention in order to deal with his pelvis.
You guys are still getting patients coming in here days after the earthquake.
Yeah, we are.
But there still isn't enough staff or equipment or medicine, and the injuries are devastating. Outside, as we were interviewing the hospital's only orthopedic doctor, father bringing in his son, his face swollen, his head bandaged. Did this boy get hurt in the earthquake, or did this just happen?
Earthquake.
With a single glance, Dr. Destine knew he couldn't treat him here.
So when somebody comes in like this, what can you do for them?
Well, first thing, we got a hero. He will make a good job. So if it's a head trauma, they call the helicopter and transfer them to Port-au-Prince.
You can't treat them if they have head trauma here.
I don't have.
You don't have it.
I don't have staff.
You don't have staff.
No.
The quake comes as Haiti is reeling from a punishing 3 months. The island struggling to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic, rising gang violence, and political turmoil following the assassination of President Jovenel Moïse.
Today, you have a country that is facing multiple crises. There's a political crisis, of course, which has always been there. Then there's a humanitarian crisis. 4 million Haitians who are basically facing, increased hunger. On top of it, there was a malnutrition crisis. And we are now undergoing a huge surge in terms of COVID. And on top of that, there's an economic crisis.
Saturday's quake triggering the trauma of the 2010 earthquake that brought Haiti to its knees. An event so devastating, the country still has not fully recovered. More than 200,000 killed. The island sits near the intersection of two huge tectonic plates, which creates multiple fault lines that cut right through the island. This weekend's quake likely in the same fault zone that triggered that 2010 earthquake.
This country has suffered through a lot of different problems that continue to exist. But one of the things I always tell people is that as broken as the country is, it has a lot of promise.
Here, where there is so much need, a little help goes a long way.
We're going to check in on Lucia.
We found our way back to Lucia and her family. They'd ridden out the storm on a neighbor's porch. I asked Lucia if she thinks she could ever recover. She responds by saying, "I will never stop crying." This country, these people ravaged by so much disaster, they're left relying on others' generosity to pick up the pieces and start all over again.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.